Kitco Mining special coverage of the Mines and Money Miami is brought to you by Snowline Gold.
In 2021, Yukon's Western Copper and Gold signed an investor's right agreement with Rio Tinto. CEO is Paul Westsells. Paul, welcome back to Kitco.
It's a pleasure to be here.
We're going to talk about that agreement. You had an update this month, but first, just to thumbnail the project.
Sure. Western Copper and Gold is a single asset development company developing the Casino Copper Gold project. We've been developing this project for a number of years, but really it's been the last 3 years that have really been really exciting years in the company. You go back to 2020, we almost doubled the resource. 2021, we issued a PEA on the project. And then last June, we issued a full feasibility study on the project as well, which shows at fairly conservative commodity prices, a $2.3 billion net present value, 18% IRR after tax. And as you mentioned on your intro, in the middle of those 3 years, we brought on Rio Tinto as a strategic investor, absolutely key to the story. And so, yeah, it's been an exciting time to be part of the company. It's been an exciting time for our shareholders.
I think also the copper prices, the uptick as well, too,
Yeah.
has not been bad as well, too. We're going to get into that in a minute as well, too. But let's talk about the Rio Tinto agreement. You had an update on it. What's going on with that? Because it was a real catalyst for the company.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so it's worth, unpacking that agreement because the agreement that we have with Rio Tinto, when we first started talking to them, our approach to them was like, look, this is a well-established deposit. It's got a lot of the engineering done, a lot of the metallurgy done. If you guys like this asset, then make a bid for it. And they countered and sort of said, look, we need to do some work. So we agreed to do this work together. It was a metallurgy program, some drilling, lots of work in terms of getting to know the permitting regime, First Nations, all of that in the area. So about a year's worth of work. To make sure that work got done, there's an investor rights agreement, which gives them, they sit on a technical committee, they've got a board observer. All those rights were in place for 18 months with a 1-year extension. So that was extended last November. So, it tells you obviously Rio's still interested and still continuing. But all those rights now will expire this November. So we'll see, what happens with Rio over this year. But, really they have until that end of November deadline to sort of decide what's next. And so we think they're pretty happy. They're certainly saying the right sort of things, but we'll see.
There's been a lot of major interest all throughout the region. So I think about tech with Fireweed Metals right now. I'm thinking down to the south of you, not far that south, but Newcrest, or I should say Newmont coming in for the assets that Newcrest holds in Golden Triangle with that tie up there. Heading further down south further would also be Kodiak Copper and also Teck again as well too. So
yeah. No, I mean, it's a great copper trend that you have there. I mean, if you look at the assets in that copper trend, I mean, we are actually probably one of the largest. We're actually, interestingly, and this is a big push, as in Canada, the critical minerals push will actually be the largest critical minerals mine in Canada. And that's the copper and the molybdenum. And I don't talk a lot about molybdenum, but it's actually a significant part of the overall deposit. And yeah, I mean, we're excited about that. I mean, excited with obviously we're excited to have Rio in. We've got, other groups we're talking to as well. I mean, there's just not a lot of good copper projects in good jurisdictions. And, the ones that you mentioned are great projects as well. A little bit earlier stage, we've got the full feasibility study, getting into permitting, in full force, likely the end of this year, beginning of next year as well.
You mentioned strategic metals and the government. So let's talk about that because that's really been the big change since we talked at Vancouver Resource Conference, not the last one, but the one before. Yes. But when we talked about a year ago, there was the Inflation Reduction Act that was introduced by the Biden administration. Canada's introduced its own programs right now. The province is also, I believe, doing something or will be doing something, or they'll remind you that's in BC. Talk about it right now. What type of support are you seeing?
Yeah, it's a great time to be a critical minerals developer such as ourselves. I mean, the federal government has identified, a number of critical minerals. Copper and molybdenum are two of them. and a bunch of initiatives on that. So one of them, they set up a fund to help to facilitate that. No one's really sure how that fund is going to be used, but there is a pot of money there. More importantly, I mean, you've had Minister Friedland, publicly talk about fast tracking projects. Obviously, us with one of the larger ones. I mean, I was in Ottawa a couple of weeks ago, sort of talking about that and saying, hey, here's a perfect example. This is a great project in terms of moving forward. The other really exciting thing that and it's in its early stages, but actually is the idea of connecting the British Columbia grid and the Yukon grid together to create a joint electrical grid. And so that would benefit us significantly because it would give us, clean, green grid power. Right now we're looking at using liquefied natural gas, which is, as green as it gets for an isolated grid that you have in the Yukon, but connecting the grids would be a significant benefit. And so the new Premier of the Yukon, Premier Pillay, this is one thing that he initiated. He's only been the Premier since mid-January, but he's directed his minister to start to look at that. And so I'm really excited by that. And the Yukon as a territory is excited by that. And we'll see how that develops as well. But I mean, part of this is how do you develop critical minerals? They're not, they're in remote locations. They're in northern Canada. They're in northern British Columbia to make sure that that Canada remains a major player in the critical mineral space. You need to build infrastructure, and that's what they're looking to do.
Talk about the other infrastructure pieces, Paul, with the project. How is the roads up there? What does that look like?
Yeah, and so I mean that was another. It was a great announcement. This is 2017. The Prime Minister Trudeau came into Whitehorse, made an announcement. 3 roads to resources, including the road to our casino project. And as you know, I mean, governments are great at coming out and making announcements, but this is one that's actually come to fruition. So last year, the First Nations signed a definitive agreement on the first part of that road. There was a contract signed which provided, significant benefits to that First Nation. The road started construction last year. It's a $30 million contract that was granted. It's going to be finished this year. That's the first section of the road, but that's going forward. And the thing to remember about the Yukon is, this is different than the NWT in Nunavut. Like this isn't a glaciated area. We're talking about an access road, very, very straightforward, but it provides year-round access, to our mine site, and obviously very critical to the development of the mine.
Lastly, Paul, milestones over the next 12 months.
Yeah, I mean, the big emphasis this year is really on getting our project into the regulatory process. We need to see, we're waiting to hear YESA, they're refining, so the regulatory process in the Yukon goes by the acronym YESA. So they're going to provide us with new guidelines here in about a month's time. Once we'll have those, we'll have better guidance. But it's likely end of this year, beginning of next year when that will go in. But we'll know better then. That's going to be the key guideline. We're going to find out what Rio does. Their rights expire in November. That's going to be a big part of the story as well.
Paul, thanks for speaking with Kitco.
All right. Always a pleasure talking to you.
My name is Michael McRae with Kitco Mining here at Mines and Money Miami.
Kitco Mining, special coverage of the Mines and Money Miami, is brought to you by Snowline Gold.